Get started. Folks are still trickling in, but the hour is well on its way from our start time. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Tonight we want to present a couple of things about fracking. We've got Melanie Houston, who's going to present from the Ohio Environmental Council, is going to present a lot of what's happening at the State House and what's going on at the state level. We have Brian Kunkemuller of the Ohio Sierra Club, who's going to present specifically on injection wells. And our last segment will be a viewing of Mohican the Long View, which is a very short documentary about the Mohican Valley by Tim McKee. And we'll do just an open forum at that time to talk about what folks think some of the impacts might be on the Mohican Valley and the Loudonville area from, in particular, the enhanced recovery wells. The fracking issue in itself is very broad and very vast, and we're exposed to lots of public relations material, through the media and so forth. What we're doing here in Loudonville and in Ashland County is just on a grassroots level, presenting to folks some of the concerns. Again, like I said, primarily about the waste stream that's generated from hydraulic fracturing and how that might impact the communities that are downstream from that waste. So without any further ado, a couple of quick housekeeping things. The bathrooms are out in the hallway area, easy to find. There are refreshments at the back table. Help yourself to them. There is a donation can if you would like to donate. If you did not register when you came in, I would ask that you please do that. And there's a column there that asks how you found out about the forum. We want to make sure that we're doing our PR work effectively and reaching out to the folks in the community. If you have a cell phone, if you could please put that on silent, and any calls that you need to take, please go outside to take those. And without any further ado, we'll get started with Melanie Houston from the Ohio Environmental Council. Melanie?
Thank you. Well, can you hear and see me okay if I stand here? We're not going way back into the room, so just give me a signal in the back if you're having trouble hearing me, I suppose, if I'm not projecting enough. This way I can kind of move my slides forward as I need to. So yeah, thanks so much for having me this evening. My name is Melanie Houston. I work for the Ohio Environmental Council. We're based in Columbus, Ohio, although I should say that I grew up and spent a large portion of my life in Knox County, growing up sort of in the actually out in the country, but just say the Mount Vernon area, and then also went to college in Licking County, Denison University, and so I'm familiar with this area, and I've canoed on the Mohican River and spent some time. My mother actually has some roots, family members in the Loudonville area, so it's really beautiful. It was a beautiful drive here from Mount Vernon to Loudonville, and I really have an appreciation of this area and this community. So I just wanted to say that so that my voice isn't just one coming from Columbus, Ohio to you, but that I'm familiar with your community. So a little bit about, well, my position and work at the Ohio Environmental Council, I do work on advocacy and policy relating to fracking, or shale gas development, hydraulic fracturing, whatever you might want to call it. And I also do another portion of my work and time is spent working on an environmental health issue around toxic chemicals and consumer products. So I've kind of been expanding in that area as well recently. But at the Ohio Environmental Council, really our mission is to secure healthy air, land, and water for all who call Ohio home. And we use legislative initiatives, legal action, scientific principles, and statewide partnerships to secure a healthier environment for Ohio's families and communities. And we have 2 staff attorneys in our office. We have policy staff. Of course, we have advancement and fundraising folks as well. But collectively, our staff has over 100 years of experience working on these sorts of issues and advocating for a cleaner, healthier Ohio. And I'd like to use my time to talk with you this evening for what Bill invited me to speak about, which is fracking or hydraulic fracturing. And I know I don't have a limited amount of time, so there are certain things that I'll cover in my talk today, certain things that I won't be able to get into as much, but I did bring, and which can be found at the table at the front where you signed in, not only my business cards, but also shale gas call them shale gas resource guides, sort of a citizen guide. We put that together this past winter, sort of finalized it with help from our scientific consultant that we've worked with for many years, a woman named Julie Weatherington Rice, with Bennett and Williams. Folks have a lot of kind of geology and engineering experience, and so we have that resource you can take with you tonight. And I told you a little bit about our organization already. Many of you maybe have seen this map, just giving you a sense of where some of the different shale deposits, also called shale plays, are within the United States. And you can see where we are with Ohio, and having the Marcellus and the Utica shale play. For Ohio, all of our wells, a significant portion of our wells are in the Utica play or deposits right now, and not the Marcellus. That differs from our sister state, Pennsylvania, where more of their development is tapping into the Marcellus. And so what I want to basically say is, hydraulic fracturing is quite different from conventional oil and gas drilling, and the big difference being that much more rock is being fractured, so up to 10,000 lineal feet, and as a result, more water, more chemicals are needed for fracking each horizontal well. Also worth noting that each well pad can have multiple wells within it. This is another map, a bit dated here. This is a Columbus Dispatch put this together, but I just sort of liked it because it gives you a sense of where the most, kind of the hotbed areas of shale development in Ohio, where the most concentrated development areas are for, again, those extraction wells. So I'm going to be talking really about the extraction well side of things, whereas my colleague Brian's going to get into the injection well side of things much more. But these dots here represent, this is where we were December 2012. Again, I apologize, this one's dated, but I still kind of like to use it because of the zooming in on the counties here. And again, you can see Columbiana, Carroll, Jefferson, Harrison are kind of where the hotbed areas are. And I believe that trend is still true. Fracking was first used in Ohio in 2006. And again, just to be really clear, when I talk about fracking, I'm talking about the combined use of the horizontal drilling with the hydraulic fracturing technique, those two things combined. First used for, I believe it was in the Marcellus, was the first one in 2006, but then we really didn't see a significant ramp up of permitting occurring until the end of 2011. And then as of June 21st, which is the last update that the Ohio Department of Natural Resources webpage provided, and quick way to go and get updates on the numbers. They provide kind of cumulative activity and spreadsheets as well, but just you can Google in, what I always do is ODNR shale gas activity, something like that, and you'll get quick, it'll take, link right quick to that page to get those updated numbers. Where we are as of June 21st, again, about 1,400 permitted wells, about 950 drilled wells. And again, just another map to kind of give you a sense of where these deposit areas are in Ohio and how far kind of west, south, north, I suppose east it goes. But to be even a little more clear, so I don't think I have it indicated on this map. The northernmost one that I am aware of was up here, and apologies, this is foggy, but was Geauga County. I think furthest west that I last checked was here, kind of Knox and Licking, and then I'd have to check on the furthest south where we are right now. Somewhere, I think, around in this area. But I'll have to check on that again for y'all. And then your county, we're in Ashland County, right, which is, I think, up here, right, bordering Knox. Okay, geography, what's in here? Great. So, just, we're still pretty young, kind of in the infancy stage here in Ohio in terms of our numbers of wells. I mean, those numbers are really, starting to ramp up quickly, but our, sister state Pennsylvania, much further along, states out in the west like Colorado, Wyoming, Texas. I mean, these are some of those states that are West Virginia, much further along in development. And so when we talk about risks to water and air quality, we sort of look to our sister states and western states to get a sense of what's happening. Some of the research really that's been done is looking at those other states where we're further along with this development. And so we know from these states that we've seen some significant problems associated with air and water. And I just have some quotes here from maybe some of the more prominent couple studies here at the top, and the Akron Beacon Journal, of course, the newspaper report. But in terms of air pollution, we're talking about increased emissions of things that we're concerned about for public health, for human health, things like VOCs or volatile organic compounds. Benzene is something to be very concerned about. Endocrine disrupting chemicals. Hydrogen sulfide is something that can be found in oil and gas wells really across the board, but again, significant air pollutants that we've seen arise as a result of rising in areas where the development is further along. And so again, Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, I think for the first time actually went out of what's called attainment for their air quality standards in that state. And so one resource, I don't have it listed here, I've had my air water quality slide first. I don't have it listed here, but I would direct you to the weather channel did, in concert with some others, did a nice piece on the Eagle Ford shale play, which is in Texas. If we go back to this map, right, the Eagle Ford you can see down there in Texas. And they did a nice piece, a documentary, a series of short videos, which I would recommend. You can check that out. It's stories.weather.com/fracking. I can share that again later if folks are interested, but it gives a nice kind of overview again of what some of these air concerns are and some stories of actual individuals who've experienced more severe problems as a result of that. In terms of water concerns, well, first off, we know fracking uses very large amounts of water, and the estimates will range when you read different sources of information, different references, but I've seen it in ranging from 5 to 10 million gallons per well. And we know that there have been many cases of suspected water well contamination throughout shale developed areas. Two of the more noteworthy cases that you may have heard about in the news media, Pavilion, Wyoming, and Dimock, Pennsylvania. I believe in both of these cases, the US EPA has been or is investigating those reported cases of more significant contamination. And we also know that aside from risks with underground, potential for migration materials, so for example, the Duke University study looking at methane concentrations in drinking water wells, the thought there is that methane, migrates underground. But we also know that surface level, where we're most likely to see concerns is around surface level spills and accidents, which occur when you partake in an industrial activity. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those incidents later on. Also worth noting that there is a research and science lag. So this is why we talk about other states, and that some of this research and studies happen in other states. When folks ask about what's happening in Ohio, again, we're in the early stages, and again, it takes time to do the research, to really get the data, and to share the data, particularly for a peer review science process. You're talking, sometimes like a year cycle to get something reviewed, let alone to gather the data, to do the research, to put together your analyses, to put together your publication, and then to get it reviewed. So just to say that there is really a lag in terms of the science and the research on this industry, and that's sort of the nature of the beast of how science works. But it's a barrier for us in being able to demonstrate, I think, with hard numbers sometimes what the actual what the actual impacts are. But I will say there's a researcher at the University of Cincinnati, a woman named Erin Haynes. I've had a few conversations with her. She's recently begun an air monitoring project in Carroll County, and she has a nice fact sheet about that, which I'm happy to share with folks. Didn't bring it tonight, but I have that on hand to share afterward. And then also my colleague Brian with Sierra Club and Carroll Concerned Citizens have been doing monitoring of surface waters for, I'd say, approximately 2 years with the Water Sentinels program, and Brian's colleague, a gentleman named Matt Trokin. And so there is a lot of individual testing of household water wells that's going on. I don't know whether this data has been centralized in any place yet, but I know that there's been efforts toward that end. And then to my knowledge, no one in Ohio is really studying specifically the health impacts associated with drilling. And anyone can, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. I do know that in our sister state of Pennsylvania, they have an interesting, project study called the Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project. And what they do there is provide medical services for folks who are suffering from health problems associated with shale gas drilling activities, and then documenting those health problems as they go along. So very interesting project. Again, like I said, I don't think we have anything parallel, similar to that here, but I think that we should look to that state as a model, again, because they're further along, further advanced in their development. And just a couple words about that study. So they have identified 27 people suffering from severe problems associated with shale gas drilling activities, and specifically in those cases they've identified air contamination as the likely cause of 3/4 of those associated illnesses. And in some cases, highly elevated levels of fracking-related air pollutants were found in the air, even inside people's homes. So we know that air can go more easily, well, I shouldn't say than water, but easily across boundaries, and doesn't, stay, in that case, it doesn't stay outside your home, right? It can make its way into your home. And also important to remember that this may be just the tip of the iceberg, as detection of illness can lag by years or decades. Examples that we know from environmental health research and literature: thyroid cancer from radiation, and mental retardation from lead poisoning. So I digressed a little bit from my slides there, but I'll kind of get back to these. How is Ohio managing the risks that we've seen from shale development in our state so far, and how are we faring? So what we do know, we've seen certainly some complications arise right around seismic activity and fracking in the state. There have been a series of earthquakes in Youngstown, the end of 2011. Those were associated with underground injection wells for brine waste. And this is just a seismic activity map and a circle around that kind of Youngstown area. We also know, though, more recently in Poland, Ohio, I believe in March, there were earthquakes as well in the vicinity of 7 fracking wells, and which are still being investigated by state inspectors. So, there's a lot of question around that, because previously we heard many claims that seismic activity not connected with extraction wells, just connected with injection wells, and now we've seen something different here. And so I think an investigation is to follow as to what's going on, but there are faults underground. We can't always detect and know where they're going to be, and so we're drilling at depths, and so I think there's disturbance in the cases, at least of Youngstown, of those previously unknown faults. We, of course, have bad actors in accidents, so not to say, that there are drillers that are good actors and do things as they should, and so, from my perspective as with the Ohio Environmental Council, I'm going to draw out some of the incidents where we've seen bad actors. Morgan County, this is a pretty big black eye for the industry. Most recent incident, 100-barrel spill of drilling mud into an unnamed creek and an unknown amount of wet gas released. And this was supposed mechanical failure of a wellhead. As I had read, I believe, a pocket of natural gas. And these are some images from a colleague of mine of the well pad. And then it's harder to see in the image to the right, but some seepage from the hillside of some of those materials. oil-related materials. But this is, yeah, one of those cases where not necessarily a bad actor in this case, but an incident, an accident that occurred that we should have been prevented and was not able to, and some evacuation of folks as a result, some hazardous materials that were in both air and water. And then more on the kind of bad actor side of things, we have intentional brine dumping in a storm drain, and I think most of us know storm drains lead to our waterways and to our rivers, and so this was a very unfortunate event. About 200,000 gallons of brine, fracking waste fluid, brine likely laced with other chemicals and materials, making its way again into the Mahoning River, putting wildlife and also drinking water resources downstream at risk. And then I also note something, so it can be a little more complicated to describe, but as I understand, the industry term called frackouts is a term to describe kind of a releasing of clay slurry in the pipeline drilling process. So we have pipelines being drilled to move this material, right, to put the infrastructure in place to move this material. And in this case, was a Markwest company where clay slurry used to bore the hole for the pipeline spilled into some streams and wetlands. And in that case, it was a matter of that material sort of smothering out aquatic life, building up, levels in the stream that not necessarily the toxic laced material, but again, a toxic or a life-ending effect for the aquatic life specifically. And then, for Carroll County, these are some images from Carroll County shared by a colleague there working with Carroll Concerned Citizens. I think some of the most kind of prominent effects or impacts that folks are seeing there so far, both from talking with Paul and then another colleague of mine I work with on a project called the Listening Project, where this colleague, her name is Caitlin Johnson, she works with Ohio Organizing Collaborative. She's going out and she's trying to just hear from folks on what are they seeing, how long have they lived in the community, what are, some other background questions, but really what are they seeing on the ground there in Columbiana, Carroll, and really the hotbed areas of development in Ohio. And some of the most predominant themes that are coming up so far have to do actually with, increased traffic, very heavy traffic, increased car accidents, rising rental costs, and in some cases, sort of putting people out of a place to live in cases where folks are in rental situations. We have this sign here and then images of the traffic. And then in some cases, perceptions that maybe crime is on the rise as well. And then just a note from another colleague that with Policy Matters, a woman has done an economic impact study recently. They've found that in some cases royalties aren't necessarily as good as what they have been promised as well. And so that's sort of another kind of local, concern for these communities. I'm going to get into not too much in the weeds. I'll try not to with policy.